So yes, I did purposely match my shirt to the theme, of course. And so happy to be here. And Mike has really inspired me in my presentation. So Will is literally my middle name. Again, that's not a joke. My name is Jared William Anderson. I'm named after my mother's two youngest brothers. And Jared was only 6 years old when I was born. And so at 6, he was big Jared, and I was little Jared. And so now I'm big little Jared in my family. So Will is my middle name. I also have it tattooed to me in a few places. But I've been trying to make my middle name something else, and that's control. Because I'm kind of addicted to it. And will is one of these beautiful paradoxical principles. Anyone who's heard me before knows that the paradoxes of human nature and wellness are some of my very, very favorite things. And we as human divine beings in human systems struggling toward goodness, there's a lot of messiness in that. One of my favorite things I've done has been in a job I never expected to have, which is being a prison chaplain. And I get to teach volunteers and train volunteers at the prison. Similar group as this, usually, actually. We have a lot of people with a lot of life experience, volunteering at the prison. And so one of my favorite moments in prison, sentences you don't usually expect to hear. My kid, it never gets old. I'll be talking to my kids where I'm like, as soon as I can leave prison, I'll come get you. It's like, sure, Dad. Have fun at prison. And with a straight face, I say my time in prison has been good for me. And prison really has been an amazing education in systems. And so one thing that I tell volunteers is I say, do as much good as the system allows you to. Don't do more good than the system allows you to, because you will get in trouble. You will get literally punished for doing good things. In fact, I got quality time with my captain several times the first couple months because I went from academia to ministry. And in academia, it's so thinky, kind of everything goes, right? So students would say to me, can I revise your entire grading rubric? I'm like, absolutely, go for it. If you have a counter proposal of how the class works for you, I didn't know that I was taking a pastoral approach to university teaching at the time, but it makes a lot of sense now. If you want to say, I'm having a really hard time in this particular aspect of class, can I make a counter proposal? Inmates will give you counter proposals, and listening to them is a very, very bad idea. Makes me think of the 70-year-old piano player who fell in love with the 28-year-old, but that's a different topic. True Love for Now is my anthology of prison love stories. You have to admire him. So what I have come to with in the context of prison, and I call prison life skills with catastrophic consequences. And when I teach volunteers, I say, okay, we're going to go through the rules of being a prison volunteer, and we're going to go through the things that will get you talked to, things that will get you suspended, things that will get you criminally prosecuted, and things that might get you killed. So let's just go through these one by one, and that usually gets their attention. prison, again, it's about life in a very intense context. And one great secret is that inmates aren't that much different than the rest of us. So it is true that inmates are master manipulators, but so are toddlers. In fact, I'm going to come back to toddlers in just a second, because we're going to talk about will and we're going to talk about control. And because the great secret is that all of us, whether we admit it or not, are constantly trying to get what we want. That's how we are as human beings. So one thing that I have learned to do, words are not very impressive. I really love the Maya Angelou quote that says, when someone shows you what they are, believe them. And so what I've learned to do over time is to look at patterns and then actions and then words. And usually words are most helpful to determine self-delusion, hypocrisy, and wishful thinking. I was surprised and not surprised to look. Let's come back to toddlers, because as I talk about will, I want to break this down into 3 ways of thinking about will. One is willfulness. There's where our toddlers come in. And then 2 is willingness, which is where all of us are to differing levels. And then the 3rd is divine will. And the paradox is that we have our greatest freedom when we surrender it. And that's why I've titled this lesson, Determined Surrender. Because as Charles Fillmore said, will is that principle that engages all of the other powers. So it is will that is applied attention. We use our will to access our divinity. We use our will to exercise all of our other strengths, principles, and powers. And so there's a growth that happens from our toddlerhood to our acceptance of divine will. And I have been humbled and sobered to realize that many of my behaviors are functional temper tantrums. I just turned 44 last week, and I am still temper tantruming. And literally this morning, I realized that my protest that I am not understood, I also enjoy not being understood, but that's a different thing, is really a protest, a temper tantrum at the fact that I am not controlling all of my interactions, that people are not engaging with me the way that I want them to. I am not being understood in exactly the way that I want to be understood. So I have control issues, but don't worry, I'm right about everything. And so my control issues are healthy, right? I mean, that not true at all, of course. So we never really grow out of our toddlerhood. And one thing that I've learned in my ministry training is that we don't so much overcome things as we learn to integrate them, as we learn to compassionately relationship with them. And so it's not that we'll never temper tantrum again. It's more having the grace to say, oh, well, there's a temper tantrum. Okay. And just like with a toddler, who knows a toddler? Right? Our representative toddler. One thing that blew my mind is when toddlers lie, we've talked about this before, they're not actually lying. When toddlers lie, They are trying to change reality. Anyone who has put a toddler in a car seat understands this wrestle, this mighty wrestle to change reality. And one of my favorite metaphors is that you don't try to convince anyone of anything, you just hold them accountable to their own stuff. And I call this like emotional jujitsu, where jujitsu, and then this is that toddler car seat where it's like, I'm really not trying to hurt you, I'm just trying to get you in this car seat. And yet, I mean, they are amazing, right? Where they can become little jujitsu, masters themselves, like this contortionists to try to get them, in the car seat. And this is willfulness. Willfulness is that no, I will not move, or I will move in every single possible way so that I end up on the floor. Toddlers are exerting every single bit of energy that they have to see if they can change reality. And it turns out that society teaches different among us different things. And so a lot of men that I take care of in hospice have never really grown beyond this toddler stage. Because sometimes when boys especially are like, no, reality is different, people are like, okay. And they never learn. So this is willfulness. And how we get to will, divine will, is our use of willingness. So willingness is that bridge between our willfulness and then our willingness to surrender and submit to our divine will. And again, this is that paradox where we are never better than when we surrender to what's best for us. But our culture is currently toxic. It's profoundly toxic. And that's one of my favorite things about unity principles. Like I'll graduate divinity school in April, and I have to tell you, this will save you tuition. My training in divinity school, in ministry and social science is so affirming of unity principles. Like I take class after class, I'm like, yep, unity's right. We are on the right track. And our culture is so toxic because our culture teaches this toxic perfectionism, but you can't actually be perfect because you have to be dissatisfied in order to buy things. Well-being, like wellness, is a radical rebellion. One of my favorite memes, I may have brought it up, is when it's like, you say we need therapy, but I think you mean revolution. I think I may have said that last time, where and unity is a revolution. Well-being is a revolution. Acceptance is a revolution. Because society tells us you are never enough. You have to try to be perfect, and you never will be. So maybe just get that flat screen TV. Like that is literally what society is teaching us. The global religion is dissatisfaction-based, exploitation-based consumerism. The global religion is a death cult where we exchange death for money. Unity is the opposite. Unity is a thoroughgoing devotion to life and love. My own spiritual path has gone from Mormonism, which is like cult strength perfectionism, and then humanism, which is like cooler perfectionism, and then Buddhism, which is acceptance, and then unity, which is love. And just this past week, I've been taking this spiritual formation class, so many psychology tests, psychological evaluations. And we talk about humility and, self-differentiation and spiritual awareness. And I thought I was doing pretty well until I realized that the class had framed everything as love, where it's all about accepting love and experiencing ourselves and each other as beloved and engaging beloved community. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. But I'm really good at control. Maybe I can try that. And so the purpose of our will and the best use of our will is to realize that embracing divine will is really about joining the flow of life and joining the dance of life and realizing that we are not so much these willful toddlers as we are part of this beautiful wholeness, this divine wholeness. One of my favorite description of Christ consciousness is that we are particular expressions of the divine mind, that we are particular beautiful expressions of divinity. So I want to finish by talking about 3 teachings of Jesus, of Christ, that talk about will. Gethsemane, the Lord's Prayer, and then his teaching on perfection. And it's such an invitation to take each of these seriously. Because in Gethsemane, I think we jump too quickly. I talked about this on Easter, to your will be done, it's all, I surrender to the divine will. The first part of that prayer is that toddler prayer. Daddy, I don't want this. I don't want to hurt. I don't want to grow up. I don't want to do the hard thing. It hurts. And then, of course, the second part is, but I'm going to use my will to accept the divine will that, of course, unlocked the divinity. And then the second is the Lord's Prayer, which as a chaplain, I get to say a lot. I need to memorize it in Spanish. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Let's translate this into unity principles. Our Father, who's in heaven, our divine selves, our divinity, who is already perfect, already whole. Thy kingdom come. This is what we are doing. This is what we are doing today. Our daily practice should be bringing the kingdom, or not bringing the kingdom, realizing the kingdom is already here, already within us. Again, I really sincerely love unity. And I just so love this insight that we are divine. And it is so difficult for me to relax into that divinity, to relax into that wholeness. And so when we say, your will be done, we are really saying, this divine will is my will. It already is my best self. And I love how explicit unity teachings are about this, where there is no God out there that's not in here. I'm going to have to translate unity into evangelical Christianity for my chaplain military review if I get there, which will be interesting. But I actually talked to an Army evangelical chaplain. And he's like, I explained unity principles a little bit. And he's like, oh, what led you to that teaching? And I'm like, well, my view of human nature is actually pretty close to evangelical Christianity, which is like, without a hell of a lot of help, we're kind of damned. Like, we need a lot of help and support to help us into our divinity. And so I'll conclude with Jesus' teaching that you will be perfect as my Father in heaven is perfect. And when I was studying Greek, it's eseste un humes telestai. And it's you shall be perfect. And in some translations of the Greek, it's ambiguous, but the Greek, it's just a simple future tense. You will be perfect. And perfect is a really tricky, not tricky, it's beautiful. It doesn't mean flawless, it means whole. In Hebrew, it's shalem, which is the root of shalom. And in Greek, it's teleos, and it means mature, whole, complete. Sometime I do want to give a lesson on early Christian heresies, because there are early Christian heresies that line up with unity a lot better, particularly Gnosticism. And so in traditional Christianity, what became Orthodox Christianity, we have this idea that, like, we're damned, we're in a lot of trouble. This is like Pauline Christianity. He just inherited it. And we need Jesus to redeem us. Gnostics said, no, you just need to learn the truth about yourself. And you need to learn the truth that you already are divine. And Jesus, the Gnostic Jesus, this is the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostic Jesus says, I don't need to die for you. I just need to live. And the living Christ tells you, I'm uniting this up just a bit, but the living Christ tells you that you are the living Christ. And that's all you need to know. And so I am grateful to be on this journey with you of, again, not working hard enough to be perfect, not being seduced by that dissatisfaction. I kind of gain benefit from thinking that life is really hard and inevitably hard. But again, I'm curiously wondering whether or not life, even my life, could be more joyful and peaceful and, dare I say, easy than I could ever imagine. And it's the simplicity on the other side of complexity and the ease on the other side of difficulty, because it is true that life is more complicated than we can literally understand as human beings. But the way to show up to life is profoundly simple. Thank you.